One, but guess what, everybody? The moment that we've been building up to, it is the grand finals here at the New Jersey Regional, and we've got that between Alex Underhill and Emilio Forbes. This is game number 1 of this best-of-3 series, where Alex will be leading with the Palkia and the Ice Rider Calyrex right off the bat, and Emilio sticking to the Shadow Rider Calyrex and the Thunderous.
What an incredibly strong start from both of these trainers. Alex sending out both of his restricted Pokemon. I don't think there's a possibility for both of these Pokemon to remain on the field at this point in time. The Shadow Rider Calyrex alone is enough to threaten an insane amount of damage onto the opposing Ice Rider Calyrex, who you know is going to be slower. It wants to have Trick Room up on the field, and this Palkia as well, going to take a lot of damage here. So, you know, I really love how Emilio has started off with just his 2 best Pokemon, and now immediately slowing down the tempo to respect the threat of a possible Trick Room from Alex.
Well, the other thing about this, too, was that Gastrodon has Storm Drain. So if you are going to be facing up against a Dynamaxed Palkia, which is exactly what we're going to see on Alex's side, maybe a Max Geyser here could be completely negated. We'll have to see what happens in the rest of this turn, but Calyrex goes for the Astral Barrage first. The Ice Rider Calyrex on Alex's side, it does get a chance to hang on, but that Max Geyser getting completely neutralized by Gastrodon's Storm Drain.
An incredible read there from Emilio, recognizing the fact that Palkia probably wouldn't go for Max Wormwind, as it would drop that Thunderous's attack stat and give it that Defiant boost that we all know it loves to get. Also not going to go for something like a Max Quake, because it's just not going to be as beneficial. That Max Geyser would have brought that Calyrex straight down, would have done a nice amount of damage to that Thunderous, but Gastrodon just happy to not only absorb it via Storm Drain, it gets a special attack boost, and now Trick Room is up on the field as well. If Emilio wants, he can yawn the Palkia and force it to lose its last turn of Dynamax to sleep, or not lose its last turn of Dynamax, but, you know, be put to sleep after its Dynamax concludes, or you can just go for the knockout onto the Calyrex Ice.
Yeah, I mean, Earth Power here, plenty to be able to pick up that low Ice Rider Calyrex. And now, Palkia can go for the Max Wormwind, but guess what? Shadow Rider Calyrex does have a Focus Sash, but also you don't need it right now. It's going to survive.
It is. It holds on with just enough HP, and this Astral Barrage now single target into the Dynamax Palkia. Still does a ton of damage. You have to remember that Palkia is one of those bulkier restricted Pokemon. It's going to be able to take a few hits, but still just not the type of damage you want to be taking this early on. Alex sending in that Rillaboom for the Calyrex Ice Rider means that you do have Grassy Glide now to threaten that Gastrodon. You also can bring the threat of Fake Out, so you don't have to worry about Yawn as much this turn. But still, having to lose the Calyrex Ice Rider early on in this game does mean that Alex has lost one of his main modes of offense. And looking at the other Pokemon on his team, you have to wonder if it's that Gothitelle or that Alchemy in the back of his party. Losing the Palkia will mean that his offensive pressure will just drop to nothing. If it's the Incineroar, you just wait for something to get knocked out, like that Calyrex, you send in that Thunderous, and then all of a sudden that Intimidate works in your favor. So even though Alex got what he wanted at the beginning of this game with that Trick Room setup, Emilio is still just keeping an incredible control of the board.
That Gastrodon's going to get switched out in favor of Emilio Zacian. So, you know, if there is going to be a Grassy Glide heading its way, it's going to be okay. Shadow Rider Calyrex also going for a Protect here to try to bide out one of the turns of Trick Room, but the Rillaboom's U-turn trying to just finish the job, but it's not going to be able to do so. We will have to see that from the Palkia, which did double up into the Shadow Rider Calyrex.
A very good play there from Alex, recognizing that maybe if the Gastrodon switches out, you don't necessarily switch in that Thunderous quite yet. Zacian would not take damage from a Dragon-type move because it's part Fairy-type. Does get that attack drop onto the Zacian as well, which will make it a little bit easier to handle, but now with that Thunderous back out on the field, if Alex was going to U-turn into that Incineroar to get an Intimidate down on that Zacian, you're going to have to worry about that Thunderous. We also have not seen Emilio go for Dynamax yet. There's only 2 turns left in Trick Room. If you can just maybe find one more switch into that Gastrodon and a Protect somewhere, Thunderous comes in, has the speed advantage, no more threats of Trick Room, has possibly a Defiant boost, and then can Dynamax and just go on the offensive.
For sure. I mean, Thunderous can still protect. We do see that as one of the moves that Emilio has on that Thunderous available to it. So while, yes, I mean, you at least have a great way to be able to deal with some of the turns of Trick Room, but it's going to be Zacian switching out here. That means that Gastrodon has to come back in the face of this Rillaboom, no less. But it's time to just Dynamax anyway. That's Thunderous.
I think the Thunderous has enough bulk at this point that it can withstand this upcoming turn. We haven't seen Palkia go for any Ice-type attacks, which would be its best bet into a Pokemon like Thunderous. And thanks to the Dynamax, it'll also have double the HP, which, again, just makes it so much more easier to stall out these last 2 turns of Trick Room.
Ooh, oh, but the knockoff from the Rillaboom to knock off the Life Orb. The Hydro Pump, though, giving another Storm Drain boost over to the Gastrodon that Emilio just switched in. But a max Airstream from the Thunderous will be able to hit the Rillaboom, super effective damage, 1-hit knockout. And now, just like that, Alex is down to his final 2 Pokemon, yet to reveal that 4th and final one that he's brought to this Game 1.
Good information about that knockoff. Getting rid of the Life Orb certainly does help Alex's team withstand a couple more attacks, maybe, but it all comes down to this last Pokemon. If it is going to be that Incineroar, here comes the attack boost, and here comes the offense. With the 1 turn of Trick Room remaining, and with Thunderous having access to Max Guard, all Emilio has to do is click that and really hope for the best. I mean, Palkia has taken enough chip damage at this point in time that a +1 Max Lightning or possibly even an Airstream with a little more chip from Gastrodon would be enough to knock it out, and then you don't have to worry about Trick Room being reset.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly why Alex clicks in that forfeit. There's a piece of information here that he has that he wants to keep secret from Emilio, you know, seeing how he handles Trick Room. He just went for the full power option.
Well, I think the other thing that Alex just recognized that Emilio doesn't even have to Max Guard there. Could just go for the raw damage, did get the Defiant boost, and so probably surviving anything going in his direction from that Palkia or that Incineroar, so we're going to be able to secure the knockouts. But that is game number 1 going over to Emilio, and now Alex does have to make some adjustments here to bring us to a game 3.
You have to look at how he started off that game with both Palkia and Calyrex Ice Rider on the field next to each other. Turn 1, no speed control on the field available to them, and quite frankly, staring down some of the toughest matchups for those 2 Pokemon on Emilio's team. If Calyrex Ice Rider had made an appearance under Trick Room, it would be able to easily knock out that Thunderous with a Glacial Lance or 2. Likewise, would have done amazing damage against that Calyrex Shadow Rider, and I think that's the adaptation that Alex has to make going into this game too. You know, yes, you are sending out 2 Trick Room users as your lead, and you are giving yourself the option to pivot. I don't think you go for that, though. I think you have to take a stronger stance. You have to maybe rely on Fake Out plus a Trick Room user. And the safest way to do that, especially if you're expecting another Thunderous lead from Emilio, is probably the Gothitelle next to the Palkia. Fake Out, Trick Room. Palkia is bulky enough, it can probably pull it off. And then as soon as the Gothitelle is removed from the field, or you get an opportunity to switch something around, you get that Calyrex Ice Rider in, and you just have so much more momentum in your favor.
It's a tough call, because I think another thing that Alex wasn't able to really keep in mind for that game number 1 was the Gastrodon. I think Emilio was able to catch him off guard with a couple of the switch-ins.
Definitely.
And so Gastrodon ate a Max Geyser, ate a Hydro Pump, and that was a lot of damage that Alex could have utilized to his advantage in that first game. So that is something else he's going to have to keep in mind going forward to that game too.
Yeah, I think if you're Emilio as well, just because of how comfortable that was for you, you keep the same strategy. I really love how Defiant Thunderous forces your opponent to sort of play in a certain way. It brings enough pressure alone in Team Preview to keep troublesome Pokemon like the Incineroar off the field. That being said, I do think Emilio has to continue to be careful about how he positions that Gastrodon because, you know, we saw Alex go for those water type attacks when it switched in. If Alex is able to maybe look at that game one and reflect on those predictions that he made unsuccessfully and then change it up this time around, maybe go for a grassy glide instead of a knockoff, maybe try and go for a spatial render too to get that damage down onto the Gastrodon a bit earlier, it'll just make things easier to play through overall.
So many adjustments that we can look forward to. You know, it's all speculation though. You know, Emilio, Alex, they've definitely looked at this matchup. They've definitely looked at how they want to approach the games moving forward. Sounds like we might be having a couple more technical difficulties here. So we're gonna make sure that we get those figured out so that we can have our finals. But yeah, that game number one leaves a lot to think about for the rest of the series.
It does, it does. And I think this is a really interesting matchup because you do get to see a way to counter Trick Room that I think a lot of trainers are relying on right now in this format of the metagame. If you were coming into this tournament and you were seeing, you know, these Palkia Alchemy teams, I think there were 5 or 6 of them throughout the tournament that actually entered.
There are a lot.
There was a surprising number. You have to play out the best you can. And in Emilio's case, it's just damage, protect, and Gastrodon. It's not as consistent or maybe as comfortable as using a taunt to stop a Trick Room or your own Trick Room to reverse the Trick Room, but you can play through that way. And if it works once, why not try it again?
Yeah, well, here's the adjustment you were talking about. Let's get the Gothitelle and the Ice Rider Calyrex in here. That's what Alex is going to be leading with for this game number 2, and Emilio brings the Thundurus and the Shadow Rider Calyrex once again.
So interesting that we do see that Calyrex Ice Rider as a lead once again. I feel like it's in a very precarious position here. Emilio could predict that Calyrex Ice Rider protects. Gothitelle goes for a Trick Room and then just doubles into the Gothitelle to guarantee the knockout. But if Alex predicts that and goes for a Glacial Lance, it's going to do so much damage to both these two Pokemon. We also already saw that Calyrex Ice Rider take a Astral Barrage with the double target damage. So both these trainers have to think really carefully about how they play through this turn. Alex also could just make a defensive switch here, you know, maybe send in something that can take an attack a little bit better. Alternatively, maybe just try and assume that your opponent's going to focus in on that Gothitelle and switch it into something else.
Gothitelle getting switched out for the Rillaboom that Alex has brought to this game too. So Grassy Surge is going to become active, but what did Alex do with that Ice Rider Calyrex? Gotta pay attention to that, because it's about to Dynamax here in this game too.
It's a bit of a risky play, but knowing that Calyrex Ice Rider is Dynamaxing right now, that means that Thundurus did not Dynamax, and I think that's the key takeaway here. Without that Dynamax, I'm not sure if this Thundurus can find enough damage to threaten a knockout on this Calyrex Ice Rider, and a Max Hailstorm, you know it's going to find that KO very comfortably.
Yeah, Thundurus is going to go for the Wild Charge as well. So just a little bit of chip damage to the Rillaboom, but it does resist it. So Thundurus also takes some recoil from both the Life Orb as well as the Wild Charge, and the Max Hailstorm comes crashing down onto the Shadow Rider Calyrex, bringing it right down to its Focus Sash. But the weather will be changing here, so that Shadow Rider Calyrex will be knocked out at the end of this turn.
I think Alex, respecting that there could have been a Protect from that Thundurus this turn, opting to go for the guaranteed damage on that Calyrex Shadow Rider. Had the Calyrex Shadow Rider gone for a Protect and that Thundurus Dynamax, like we saw it go for in Game 1, then you at least get the Hail up on the field. You at least break the Focus Sash for the Calyrex this turn so that Rillaboom can Grassy Glide and pick up the knockout. Even with that knockout on the Shadow Rider Calyrex, Emilio, if that last Pokemon is Gastrodon in the back of his party, he can't send it out on the field. You want that Zacian here to threaten the Behemoth Blade against the Dynamax that your opponent has. You also want to give the opportunity for your Thundurus to just focus in on that Rillaboom. You know, you have the Behemoth Blade, you have enough threat from that Zacian alone. You don't necessarily have to double into that Calyrex. You can just go ahead, possibly Dynamax max airstream, get that speed boost, and then eventually a Behemoth Blade will connect. If Alex wants to try and turn this game around, he's going to have to find an opening for Trick Room, which we know Gothitelle is one of the Pokemon in the back. We know that it still is at full HP. If it's Gothitelle and Palkia in the back, it's possible that he could just go for a late game Trick Room, but he's going to have to take 2 knockouts before he has that opportunity, and that's going to be very costly for him.
Well, we're going to see Emilio Dynamax the Thunderous as Zacian just goes for a protect here, not even trying to get the damage onto this Ice Rider Calyrex. As Thunderous also goes for a max guard, so just trying to make sure that they are able to withstand the fake out. That's what Rillaboom is going to use, and then a max quake from this Ice Rider Calyrex going into the protect from the Zacian, so a nice bit of damage there.
Not going to do a lot of damage. Also, that special defense boost is not going to be relevant at this point in time, but being able to deal any damage at all means that this Zacian will be closer to a knockout. And I think that's the key takeaway here. You know, Emilio afraid of the fake out plus the max hailstorm play, going for max guard on his Thunderous to keep it safe. And Alex saying, well, if I'm anticipating a double protect, this is how I can at least get some damage down on that turn and make the best of it. So a very good play from both of them here. Unfortunately for Alex, though, again, this next turn is going to hurt quite a little bit to a lot. You don't necessarily want to switch in your Gothitelle to take any attacks at this point, as you do run the risk of breaking the Focus Sash. You also don't necessarily want to switch in your last Pokemon because, again, it's just going to be taking so much damage. I think this Rillaboom probably will end up going for a Grassy Glide into that Zacian for a little bit more chip.
Ooh.
But instead
we're going to see the Behemoth Blade move first from Emilio Zacian, hitting right into the Ice Rider Calyrex. That's going to be enough to bring that Ice Rider Calyrex down. And so Dynamax off the table for Alex. It's up to this Rillaboom to be able to get something done this turn. But a nice follow-up from the Thunderous to be able to increase the attack, both the Thunderous and the Zacian, and also get the knockout onto the Rillaboom. Alex down to his final 2 Pokemon here.
A bit of a risky play for Emilio. You don't necessarily guarantee the KO with a move like Max Knuckle. Unlike the other Dynamax moves, it has a set base power and it's really not that strong. But that Rillaboom had already taken so much damage, plus there still is the Life Orb on the Thunderous, was able to pick up that KO, and I think most importantly also give an attack boost to both itself and the Zacian. We're down now to Alex's final 2 Pokemon. It's going to be the Palkia and Gothitelle. Both have access to Trick Room, but I don't know if they're going to find the opportunity to go for it.
It's going to be really, really tough. I mean, we've seen the fake out available on the Gothitelle for Alex, and so you can at least hopefully do something against the Zacian. I mean, the Dynamax is also going to be...
That was a forfeit.
Oh my gosh.
That was a forfeit. I was going to say, there was still one more turn of Dynamax. He forfeited.
Yeah, and that's it. Alex is going to forfeit. Emilio Forbes takes the championship here.